welcome to another episode of Nice Doing Business with you. Today we're welcoming Dave Nelsen, one of my favorite people. We've known each other for probably 15 plus years.
Hey, thanks for inviting me.
Yep. Dave is an engineer by training, and he believes that today every company is a technology company. I kind of agree with him. As president of Dialogue Consulting Group, Dave specializes in helping business people raise their technology quotient, or TQ. He has more than 40 years of communications experience and has been at the leading edge of business technology to include social media, search engine optimization, smartphone apps, and AI since founding TalkShoe.com, an early podcasting company that started way back in 2005 before podcasting was even cool. He's been recognized as the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year in the year 2000. He's been Speaker of the Year by Vistage Worldwide in 2011, which is a pretty big deal. And I think you've won that a few times. He was also a top speaker for Tech Canada, or TEC Canada, in 2018. And he's currently working on his newest startup, Locator software, or it's called Locator, right?
Locator, yeah.
Locator.com.
That's the URL. Cheeseburger.
Yep, we'll have to talk about that too.
Right.
So, Dave, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down. I don't think I need my notes.
You don't need your notes.
I'm pretty in tune with what you've been up to.
And I got to share a piece of trivia that surprisingly few people know. So we started TalkShoe back in 2005. And the reason it's called podcasting is because back then, this was before iPhones, right? That came out in June 2007. So we were making audio content targeting people's iPods, hence podcasting. So now everybody listening has, they're well equipped for trivia night on Tuesdays.
That's even before people could just stream everything and you had to download it and run out of storage.
Hey, we're not far from Blockbuster. Make sure you rewind the videotape or they're going to charge you $1.
Right. On the show, I like to talk about the entrepreneurial journey because I say it all the time, but I feel like most entrepreneurs never thought they were going to be an entrepreneur, whereas others, it was their lifelong dream. Which one were you?
That's a tough question because I started working for AT&T, Bell Labs, straight out of school, a 1 million person company. This was 1982 before, it was broken into AT&T and the 7 baby bells, thanks to Judge Harold Green. The government used to do stuff like that to monopolies. I was fat, dumb, and happy at Bell Labs. And, there were 27 layers. And I think this is not an exaggeration of management above me. Any idea you had to survive 27 potential killers. So it was impossible to do anything. And so, working for corporate America and being happy, that's about the least entrepreneurial thing you could do. But at the same time, I borrowed $40,000 from my parents, bought a 6-unit commercial apartment building and became a slumlord. It was, in Eatontown, New Jersey, which is a nice enough place, but it was definitely the bottom of the market in Eatontown. So, I was sort of an entrepreneur in being a landlord, but I was going to work for AT&T for 40 years. So didn't start out on a path where I ended up as sort of the bottom line, but maybe there was that little glimmer of a hint from the.
Well, and then I know you worked at the same company my mother did for a while, and that was Marconi. Was that right after AT&T?
It was, and that's what converted me to being an entrepreneur. So it was at the time 4 Systems. It was 4 years old. So this was 1993 going into 1994. And 4 Systems created the highest speed networking technology on the planet for moving information around just your office, what we call a local area network. The thing is, they did it with a technology invented by Bell Labs that was meant for the telecom wide area network.
Okay.
And they had no telecom experience. And so they hired a headhunter to go looking for some telecom people to add to the company. And I got this random call one day. And it's funny, I told the guy, no, not interested. I'm happy here at Bell Labs. And he said, hey, why don't you talk to their VP of marketing for 15 minutes? Like, what's 15 minutes out of your life? And I thought it would take me longer to get rid of the guy on the phone call than that. So I said, sure. It was completely unplanned, but I came to interview this was another crazy time. It was 3 days after Christmas, so December 28th. I had my second child at home, 10 days old, but my mother-in-law was in town. So, and she lived in Youngstown. So Pittsburgh, compared to where I was living in New Jersey, was a lot closer. My wife says, well, why don't you go talk to these people in Pittsburgh? And you'd think most companies on 3 days after Christmas would be Deadsville. it was intoxicating, the energy that was there. And I ended up joining, and it was a rocket ship. And within probably the first 3 weeks, I realized I am never going back to corporate America, because what I saw inside an actual entrepreneurial company is you could do stuff.
Yeah, your ideas
And
get legs.
yeah, right, exactly. And there weren't 27 layers. First of all, there were only like 3 layers of management from me to the CEO, Eric. Yeah, I just never went back. So when we had an idea 4 years later, Andy Fraley and I, we were both working for Four Systems. It did become Marconi, as you referenced earlier.
Right.
We had this idea, and Four Systems was a public company by then. They couldn't afford the money to implement our idea. And so Andy and I were just sort of stuck. Clearly there's a market need here. We have to, meet the quarterly numbers as a company, so we can't fund it. Andy was actually the one who said, and I don't know if he even meant it, but he said, we could do this ourselves. And about 3 months later, with support of the company, we broke away. The deal with our wives was, if we can't get somebody to give us money in 6 months, we'll get real jobs.
Mhm.
And took 3 months to close our first round of funding,
Wow.
a little bit north of $4 million.
That's a pretty big round, just for a couple guys starting out on their own.
Yeah. Now, Four Systems was like a really good credential, if you would.
Oh, right.
Because it hadn't quite happened yet as a public company, but 1 year later, it was sold before the dot-com crash for a little bit better than $4 billion in cash. This is the same decade
Mhm.
that it was founded. And so now you got two people who've been with Four, not from the very beginning, but Andy and I joined when it was still quite small. It was by then, when we left, it was 25 times large by employee headcount.
Yeah.
Over 1,000. So I think the credibility of coming off a good success, and
Right.
this was the dot-com era, right? Money was
what
flowing
year was it
free.
that you guys started the
1998.
new gig? And that was
98.
what the name of the new gig?
That was called Co-Manage.
Co-Manage. Okay, that's
Yeah.
what I thought.
Yeah, and focused on the telecom space. And it wasn't technology in search of a market need. It was a market need looking for an implementation. And that was sort of cool. I do have to make one comment about raising money. I think, and this is also the importance of having a future vision. If you can see a little bit down the road more than most people, when you approach, could be an angel investor, venture investor, the people that are early stage kind of startup stuff, if you can paint the vision and show how you're, as Wayne Gretzky would say, you're skating to where the puck is going to be,
Right.
that's really compelling to investors. And what Andy and I could see in 1998, telecom networks had really been built to carry voice. In fact, we were using these things called modems to stick data over, an analog network. And we could just see the growth of data was going to, within a couple of years, cross over. And data is so much bigger than, the bandwidth needed to carry voice, that networks are going to be evolving from being designed for voice to being designed for data. And
Okay.
you need new tools for that, right? It's no longer deterministic routing. It's statistical multiplexing. And sorry to use so much lingo here, but that's what we saw. And we were able within 3 months to paint a compelling vision of what telecom was going to look like and how we would capitalize
Yeah.
on it. And of course, the original plan completely exploded in 2001. So, what we did in the end was a little different.
A little bit of a
Yeah.
bubble there. Well, that's why I love talking to you, because you're always looking around the corner.
Yeah.
And you still do. So
I-
when we get, I'm sure we're going to talk about AI in a few minutes, but
Yeah.
when we do, that's where sometimes I think we freak each other out when we talk about the way
I am
where it
so
could go.
excited with what happened on February 5th, both at Anthropic with Claude Code and at OpenAI with Codex 5.3.
We'll get there.
We'll
for
get
sure.
there. That's why you
So-
want to keep listening, people.
Okay, so on, you take the risk, you roll the dice with Andy,
Yeah,
start
yeah.
co-manage, raise some funds. I kind of have an idea of how the story ended, but as far as co-manage, but can you tell us a little bit about what co-manage did, how you grew it, what the early days were like?
Yeah.
How you got customers. That's always a fascinating topic on our show.
Yeah.
Sales and marketing is always,
Yeah.
that's what piques my interest. And I find it kind of funny that you took the call with the marketer with the intent of like politely shutting him down. And the marketer is the person in the company who actually compelled you or persuaded you to make that leap.
Well, even when I went out for that interview 3 days after Christmas, I was thinking more, Four Systems with their ATM local area network switches. I was running the ATM service, and this was asynchronous transfer mode for people, not your automatic teller
I was
machine.
thinking about banks when you said
Yeah,
ATM.
exactly, and that's what people think, and ATM is by and large disappeared, now we're 30 years later, technology evolves on, but I was running AT&T's high-speed networking service, the ATM service, and 4 system switches were on the other end of our wires, and so I thought, I'll go visit these people in Pittsburgh, and, maybe there's a partnership in it. I never, when I jumped on the plane to come to Pittsburgh, was thinking that I'd actually want to work at that company, but, of course, about 8 hours later, I was sold.
All in. Yeah.
Yeah. So co-managed. So now we're, 98, we raised some money. And then 99, we got another $12 million. And then just crazy dumb luck in September of 2000, we raised 39 million. It was expensive to build software back then.
Yeah.
So we had a pile of money in September of 2000. And that's pretty much when everything in telecom blew up. The dot-com explosion happened a little bit earlier in 2000, but telecom came apart. All the people that we were selling to, these were startup players. They went by names like competitive local exchange carriers, or CLECs, we called them. And of course, there were 2,000 internet service providers, right? When any industry is new, there's like lots of players.
Right.
And then in the end, there are
You
3.
see who emerges.
Yeah, exactly. Well, our customers disappeared. So we had to do a complete reset in the year 2000. We sort of stepped back, looked at, okay, everything just changed. We're sitting on, 39 million in our bank account, but we were essentially restarting. And so we laid off 2/3 of our staff. We went from 150 people to 50 people. So we would have a good runway, right? Because we're sort of rebuilding.
So you're at 150 people at that early. How far in were you at that
2
point?
years.
2
Yeah.
years in.
2 years in, 150 people. I mean, again, this was the dot-com period and what things were like. But what co-managed ultimately became, co-managed 2, sometimes we call it, on the restart, we were selling our software to the big telecom companies. Our first customer was Sprint. It was a $5.5 million purchase. Our second customer was AT&T Wireless. And, there's only like 100 customers worldwide that would really need this product. But as you can tell, it's a very valuable and expensive product.
Micro niche. Right?
Yeah, which justifies, venture capital investment. And it was also complicated to build this product. We spent probably $30 million before we had version 1.
Wow.
Again, it's really different doing software here in 2026.
Now people are vibe coding stuff in a weekend.
Exactly. And they're not even coders, right?
Right.
So I'm working with both my kids, and they've got business degrees, and they're creating AI agents. We'll get to that later. But the short version of the story is, if you run a big telecom company, you probably have a $100 billion infrastructure in terms of all the equipment out there, and roughly a dozen different systems that tell you about that. It's sort of like 12 blind men touching the elephant, and these blind men don't talk to each other. So every system you've got has sort of a different perspective, and this creates inefficiencies. And what co-managed did was went in and built something that was sort of like a universal communicator, could talk to all of them, find inefficiencies. And, if you think about it, if you have a $100 billion capital infrastructure and you're 0.1% inefficient, and that would have been
that's
good.
worth $5 million.
That's worth $5 million.
Right.
So that's what co-managed did. And because it was venture funded, and this is something people have to think about when they bring in investors, I had these people on my board contributing to the decisions we're making. So I can't just unilaterally do whatever I want. They could fire me if they want.
Even at an early stage, I would imagine you're sitting on 39 million, but you've got to be feeling a ton of pressure to get a product up and running and turn it profitable. Like when you're playing with other people's money, there's no room to screw around or fail, right?
Right. But I mean, they're right at the table with you, and they're bringing in, one of the values of venture investors is they're bringing in talent. They've got their networks, and we didn't have a VP of sales, and the board members helped bring in a guy that had a track record in the industry that they knew from one of their other companies. But the downside of venture investing is, when a venture capitalist raises money, it's a 10-year partnership typically. So they have to get in and get out. And so by the time it gets to 2005, co-manage is 7 years old, and we probably weren't a day one investment in this 10-year partnership. And so the board members say it's time to sell. And it's not necessarily the optimal time for co-manage in terms of max value, but they're managing a portfolio of companies. And so it is optimized for the portfolio. So we got an investment banker. He knew we called this space the Telecom Operations Support System, or OSS space. So he was familiar with that and the players. And, we put together a data room and a deal book and went out and, he solicited offers. And in August of 2005, we closed the deal and I was out of a job because the
Yeah.
acquiring company didn't need a CEO. And I knew that was going to be the deal. And, so
Right.
you got to go on to the next thing. And it was a very successful acquisition in the sense of the company that acquired us was a Canadian company called Synthesis. They were also private. So it was a stock for stock transaction. So the investors weren't quite liquid yet, but they took our product into their channels, quadrupled the co-managed revenues in the next year,
Wow.
which made them look awesome. And so 18 months after they acquired us, they were purchased and everybody had their exit.
Okay.
And these days, co-manage's True Source product is still out there. It's now owned by a Indian-based public company called Subex, or at least last time I checked it was. So,
Wow.
it's almost like, co-manage is one of my kids and it grew up and got married and it's out there and living its own life.
That's a cool way to think
Yeah.
about it. And anytime you start a business and 30 years later it's still out
That's
there in
not
the
bad.
wild, that's
Yeah.
pretty good.
Not bad.
You raised it right. So I'd imagine whenever you went through that transaction, now you're hopefully sitting a little bit more in the war chest.
Yeah. And
Usually
so
that's how that works.
my next thought was,
And then-
I'm going to
and then
start a
what?
new company.
Right.
Right. So
What's next?
yeah. So 2 years earlier, so back in 2003, so I'm busy running co-manage and not thinking about launching businesses, but I was on a business trip in California reading the Wall Street Journal, and it was an article about eBay, and, it's another great quarter for eBay. And, I started thinking
This
about
is like 05?
03.
Oh,
So yeah,
okay.
the idea for what I started in 05. So the next thing's going to be called TalkShoe, a podcasting platform, in 05 after I sold co-manage. But the original seed of the idea started from reading this article about eBay 2 years earlier. And I was thinking, what really is eBay if you sort of boil it down? And it's a platform where people can connect to trade products. And I started thinking, humans also like to trade information. So maybe we could create a platform where people could connect to trade information. Just sort of that concept. 2 years later, I'm thinking, what am I going to do next? And decided to start a company. Today, it's still out there, TalkShoe.com. It's a podcasting platform. Anybody, audio, by the way, not video. Anybody can create a podcast without too much technical knowledge. And then all the magic of publishing it into, making your RSS feed and publishing into iTunes happens programmatically through TalkShoe. And it's a free service to use, at least the basic version. And so it didn't start out named TalkShoe. We called it People Connection Service, or PCS Corp. And that wasn't a very friendly name. So eventually we came up with TalkShoe. I was always fascinated by the fact that Ed Sullivan, this is really dating me, but I guess, was he Hungarian or something? He had a very heavy accent and he'd always open up by saying, tonight we have a really big shoe. So TalkShoe, because TalkShow didn't exist as an available domain. So TalkShoe was how Ed Sullivan would have said it. And then there's Max Smart and the shoe phone. And we found all sorts of fun ways to play with this thing.
That's
so
funny.
yeah. In fact, TalkShoe was just a working name for a while. And we decided to do an official naming process. And we came up with something we thought would be pretty good called Talkadoo. And when I announced it to the team, the engineers said, we're not working for a company called Talkadoo. And so we just stuck with TalkShoe. And
That
just
one got shot
TalkShoe,
down.
yeah, it got shot down despite all our best research and consumer testing. And, sometimes you got to go with your employees' intuition.
So when we first met, you were Dialogue Consulting was what I knew. You had just written your book. I knew you were doing a lot of Vistage speaking, and you still do that. We know each other through those circles.
Yeah. So now, as we're sort of looking at my career, you're going to see that the next one was completely out of left field too. So I wasn't looking to go to Pittsburgh and work for a startup.
Sometimes
and then
the opportunities find you, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what happens. And you just got to be open to and willing to take a little risk. It's super safe and sort of boring working for AT&T with 1 million employees. It's scary as heck running your own thing. And, it's sort of like the difference between driving down the highway on cruise control versus being on a roller coaster, right?
Right.
AT&T is cruise control on the highway and pretty safe, but sort of boring. And I love roller coasters. Go to Cedar Point as often as I can. But just to complete the story, so TalkShoe's running pretty well. So we're too early to market is the bottom line. There's no ad dollars yet, right? And no willingness to
Right.
pay for this. And there was one thing that was really hurting us, and it is because of how radio and television work. So, and it's different from how the internet works. So if you're an advertiser on radio or television, you're a sponsor of the show and you're sort of then creating that affiliation. It's weird because in the internet, you place a Google ad, you don't care if it's being served on a porn site, frankly, right? I mean, just nobody, because an internet ad isn't viewed as sponsoring whatever site it's on.
I would say some people care about things like that.
I'm sure they do. And by that, I'm sure Google has a lot of good, negative targeting tools and so on.
Right.
But as a general statement, this was
But
the
for
difference.
the most part, you're right. They just want impressions and clicks, and they want
Exactly.
people who are interested, even if that targeting might mean the ad showing up in a place you wouldn't expect.
Right. And
Which
so
that's
now,
basically the definition of programmatic.
yeah, with podcasting, the way people looked at it in the early days, and probably somewhat still today, is similar to how you would look at sponsoring a radio show or TV show. So we had all these micro audiences that you can't really vet, and an advertiser doesn't want to be seen as sponsoring somebody using the F word or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so it took a long time, a lot longer than I thought, for these valuable micro audiences to become monetizable. And so TalkShoe had to really run on a shoestring with almost no ongoing staff until we could sell it in 2016. And we did. Again, another Canadian acquirer. I seem to have good luck with the Canadians. And they're still running it today, and they've done a beautiful refresh on it. So my second child is out there married and
I didn't
living
realize that
independently.
you sold TalkShoe.
Yeah,
Okay.
2016. Okay, so now we got to get to the rest of the story. Around 2009, it's clear that we're too early to market with TalkShoe.
Mhm.
It's not going to be worth $1 billion. And we're going to have to sort of keep it alive on a shoestring. And so I was starting to think about what would I do next, where I could really apply all my energy. And it was a complete accident. I'm in the CEO network called Vistage. And, that's a worldwide network with about 50,000, mostly CEOs of mostly mid-sized private companies. I would say that's your typical Vistage member. I know you're a Vistage member.
Right. Yeah, long time.
Small, mid-sized private company there, Chris.
Right.
So I had learned a ton by 2009 about social media. Being a podcasting platform, we probably had one of the first apps on Facebook. We were tweeting on what we called Twitter back then, X today. And I just started educating my Vistage mates. There were, I think, 18 of us in the group. I do a 45-minute talk. This is what LinkedIn is and why it's important to you.
Mhm.
I was one of the first 100,000 people on LinkedIn, which was before Facebook, by the way. So I was on LinkedIn in January of 2004, and Facebook didn't exist till February. So people forget sort of even the
Right.
order of
I
operations
think that's
there.
when it was still thefacebook.com.
And probably, yeah. And it was probably at that time only at, one university.
Right.
And eventually it went to some of the Ivies and then Stanford and then .edu and then the whole world, right? So
Yep.
interesting to see how that goes. TalkShoe was clearly not going to be scaling like that. So I was educating business people about social media tools. And this was the hot new thing in 2009. Nobody knew anything about this. And I forget exactly how it happened, but somebody said, Dave, you're good at explaining this stuff. You should be a professional speaker. I had never thought of this idea. I'm 49 years old at that point in time, and another left turn, right? And so I started doing it, and people liked it. And I've always been an early adopter. So by 2011, the hot thing, I was still doing social media, but the hot thing was apps, right? So we're getting all these apps on our phones. And so I started doing 42 apps you can't live
That's
without
right
for
around
productivity.
the time that we met.
we would have met,
Yeah,
exactly.
2010-ish.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly. And I've just sort of evolved on technology talks since then. I've spoken to more than 2,000 groups, mostly these small Vistage groups of business people, but that's a big impact because they can take what you share and go put it to work in their business. And,
Yeah,
you know,
it's an amazing community.
it is. And most of the jobs in this country are actually created by these kind of people, right? Most people don't work for AT&T. Most people work for some kind of small and medium-sized business. And so Vistage is a really cool community to be a part of as a member to learn or as a speaker to I'm sort of a technology evangelist. The other thing is these CEOs are usually um, president of their industry association or something. So as I was mentioning, I'm jumping on a plane tomorrow to fly down to Orlando. I'm doing a 90-minute keynote at the Food Shippers of America, people who it's for anyone in the industry that moves food, right? We all
Yeah.
depend on these people. And I'm talking to them about AI. And, it's pretty cold here in Pittsburgh right now. It's not a very hard sell to go to Orlando for a day, all expenses paid.
Yeah, I heard there's some roller coasters there too.
Yes, there are. And I mean, Disney's great. I actually like Universal. They're a little bit edgier, I think, when it comes to
Yeah.
their coasters.
Well, you mentioned too before we hit the record button here, you got a pretty cool person following you, which
Yeah.
that's how you know you made it.
Yeah, doing okay. The speaker after me, I'm the warm-up act for Bill Cower.
Yeah.
And Chris said, some guy named Bill Cower? No, the Bill Cower.
The Bill
Pittsburgh
Cower.
Steelers former coach,
That's pretty
TV
cool.
personality. Yeah, unfortunately, I can't stay to watch him because I had a pre-existing plan.
You're
to
way
be-
too big time for Bill Cower.
Exactly. That's what it is. He'll be watching me. But
Yeah.
I'm skiing this coming week at Big Sky, Montana. And as soon as I'm done speaking, I got an hour and 40 minutes to make a flight out of Orlando Airport, which is 30 minutes from the hotel. This is going to be tight. And
You'll be
yeah,
running. I've ran
I'm
through
going
a
to
few,
be
few airports
running
myself.
through the airport
It's
and
never a fun feeling.
hopefully skiing by Monday morning.
Nice. So,
Who knew you could make money just going around talking to people?
right.
Especially, all expenses paid in nice places. Was in Cabo San Lucas
Yep.
and, just a lot of cool places.
And your wife travels with you on a lot of these
Often,
trips
yes,
too, right?
exactly,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's nice. You guys are empty nesters now, so
Yeah, exactly. The kids are a little bit older and on their own. And
get to chase the sunshine. And
exactly.
yeah, I don't blame you. So your newest thing, Locator, or it's just Locator, but I think the domain's Locator.
Right, exactly.
You're
Again,
starting to get back into your roots of
It's
software
funny.
and AI, and it's
I was
a very
never,
cool tool.
so I built 2 software companies, right? And a lot of venture financing, about 70 million total financing between the 2 companies, and was never going to do another one. But as I go around and talk to business people, I kept hearing the same thing. And that was, I have too many files in too many places.
Right.
And people are
I know the
wasting like a
feeling.
lot of time looking for stuff. Is it on Dropbox? Is it on Google
Well, I was just
Drive?
gonna say, sometimes you get pulled into using one you don't even want to use because of
Right.
someone you're working
It's a
with, whether it's a
client,
client
right,
or
exactly.
a vendor or a contractor.
Yeah, so I wasn't going to do another company, but it's weird how stuff comes around. So, way, way back in the year 2002, when Co-Manage made that big sale to Sprint didn't want to be depending totally on some small software company out of Pittsburgh. So they asked us to partner with a larger player who could sort of front our product. That player was a big player out of Texas called Metasolv. And I met a guy there named Steve. And pretty promptly forgot about Steve. Sorry if you're listening, Steve. Apologies. But I forgot about Steve and moved on.
Well,
and,
you knew Steve. I never even knew Steve. So
there
sorry,
you go.
Steve.
Yeah, exactly.
We haven't met.
But here's what happened. Steve has very smart kids. This is all about how Locator came to be. He has very smart kids. And when they were respectively junior and senior in high school, they won their respective divisions of the Hawaii Science Fair. And the finals, the nationals that year, so they won at the state level, the nationals were in Pittsburgh. And so Steve's coming with his kids to Pittsburgh. And it's like, who do I know in Pittsburgh? Oh, yeah, that's CEO from 20 years ago, Dave. And so he emailed me, and it was going to be Mother's Day of, I forget exactly what year anymore, but recently. I said, look, I got to be home before my wife wakes up, so we got to meet early. And he said, I'm early, despite the fact he's coming from 5 or 6 time zones, to the west. But we met. And, it was just nice catching up with somebody I knew from 20 years ago and could not have picked out a police lineup. And I don't know if he could have picked out me, but he lived in Hawaii. So a little mental note, I got to be better friends with Steve from now on.
Yeah, there's sunshine there.
Exactly. And so later I was in Hawaii and I thought, well, I got to work on building my friendship with Steve. So I looked him up this time. And we got together for coffee, and he was looking to do the next thing. And it's like, Dave, you talked to all these business people. Is there a problem we could solve? And it's like, well, too many files in too many places. There used to be products in this space. Google used to have this really cool desktop search tool. Anyway, I don't know where it went. I loved it back in the day, and it's gone. And they just probably didn't find a way to monetize it, or it was a 20% team project and the people moved on, or whatever it was. But it didn't seem like there was a good solution in this space. And It's not something that Google or Microsoft or Dropbox is going to solve because they don't want to work with their competitors.
Right.
So it's opportunity that's very clearly, open to a third party who is neutral to these players. And it's sort of hard to connect to them anyway. I mean, there is a standard process that goes by the name OAuth for how link things,
Right.
but you also have to comply with their rules. Like an example, to connect to Google Drive, our software has to undergo an annual, essentially 100-point attack to prove that it won't fail and create a path into Google Drive. Google calls this CASA, the Cloud Application Security Assessment, I think. And it's hard. And it's, costs a few $100s. You have to do it with a third-party lab every year. And then, of course, there's Apple and there's Dropbox and there's Microsoft. And we haven't even gotten to Evernote yet. Or,
Yeah.
we want to be able to pull text from your phone. And what we're trying to build, and right now it's up and running and available at locator.com for free. You can download it, install it, connect it to Google Drive, iCloud, Microsoft OneDrive, probably a couple I'm forgetting at the moment. And it runs on
Dropbox?
PC or Mac. Yeah, Dropbox, PC or Mac. And after you get it set up, you type a word in the search box and it will show you all your files within about a second.
Plus local, right?
Yeah.
Also
Yep.
your local computer.
All your local computer and all your
Right.
cloud stuff, right? In a unified interface.
Yep.
And it's
So when you're doing
blindingly
that thing
fast.
where you're like, I know I saw this Word doc, I just don't remember where it's stashed.
Right, exactly.
You
But if you can
fire that
remember
up.
something about it.
Right.
So, you remember, it had this weird word in it, XYZZY. And our locator searches both name and content. So if you can remember anything that gives a little hook,
Yeah.
you put it in the search box. And again, not just a word, but a phrase or whatever. And it will show you everything that
It
matches. And
indexes.
then a really cool observation, we list all the files, not in alphabetical order, which is how people often look at their results. We list them in reverse chronological order, so the new stuff is right at the top of the pile. So if you were working on it recently, it's going to be the first thing on top and you click it. And then we created another, once we had that observation, we created another really cool, handy feature. We call them smart lists, and you often know what you're looking for. Hey, I'm looking for a spreadsheet. Well, we've got a button that you click spreadsheet, and here's all your spreadsheets from all these sources in reverse chronological order. And again, the new stuff is at the top. That's probably what you're looking for. So often you don't even need to enter a search term to do a search. You just click, hey, presentations or documents or so. Yeah, wasn't going to do it. Saw a market need. Steve is a really talented developer. And here's the thing that's so different about 1998. We raised tens of millions of dollars to build software back then. Today, it's Dave and Steve and Claude Code. That's it. And, we use ChatGPT a bit too, and sometimes Gemini, and, we're sort of dating around. But, Claude Code and Codex from OpenAI, since February 5th, unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, unbelievable.
I just a few days ago, I watched a YouTube video.
Okay.
And then I downloaded Cursor.
Okay.
I set up 4 or 5 different MCP servers with like SEMrush, Perplexity to do some deep research, Firecrawl, so it could go and, now my AI can go and crawl a website.
Okay.
Playwright, which is another MCP server, which will grab screenshots so it can give it some more context. And I watched this great video. I'll plug the guy's name's James Dickerson.
Oh.
It's basically like vibe marketing instead of vibe coding. So with all these MCP servers.
See, I'm learning stuff
and
now.
then I grabbed a skills pack
Yep.
that, he was selling. I'm like, that'll save me some time instead of creating my own skill files.
Right.
Which were like direct response copywriting, keyword research. And I set this all up. It probably took me 2 or 3 hours to set it up.
Right.
Fast forward, we're launching a new, Paul joined us recently, who you know Paul. And they
Paul
do
Fariga,
crisis communications,
Yeah.
which is a new
Really good
thing for
PR,
us.
good PR guy.
And Paul's also a Vista speaker.
Yep.
And I'm beating around the bush a little bit, but the thing, I guess the big payoff was after I watched this video and I went back and I paused it and rewatched it. I went and bought the guy's skills pack. I set this thing up in Cursor to have an integrated development environment so I can do everything in one place. I basically say, Paul has this idea to build this interactive assessment to see how ready an organization is for a crisis. I had
That's a cool idea.
I had Cursor
Not
go
ready
and crawl all these different sites that do crisis communication.
Okay.
I trained it on our brand voice. I uploaded some of our brand assets, and in probably 30, 40 minutes, it built a landing page that was really well written. It sounded like Paul wrote it.
Wow.
It built, and then the call to action was an interactive assessment where they take the test.
Okay. Yep.
It It built the whole thing, like, and it looks nice. It also is used in our brand colors and everything, and then it gave me a system so that based on how they score, the answers and the results are customized to them with
Mhm.
suggestions. And then it coached me through, like, we build HubSpot workflows every day, but it coached me through the 5 different outcomes. Like, it did banded rates. Like, so it's, you get a score of 0 to 100, and it broke it into 5 bands.
Okay.
And depending which band you fell in, this thing basically gave customized and tailored advice, and then it coached me through setting up the HubSpot workflow. So in addition to seeing their score right after they finish the assessment, they get, and to see the results, they have to pop in their email. So this is lead gen, right?
Yep.
They get a tailored email that basically says, here's what you should work on based on how you scored and how you answered the assessment. So landing page, thank you page, conditional logic in HubSpot with 5 different tailored emails and results. Like, go back a year or two, that would have went through a strategy meeting, a
Yep.
designer,
Yep.
the developer would have
Yep.
wrestled with it and had
Yep.
to QA and debug the quiz. Then the HubSpot person's got to come in and set up all the logic in HubSpot. Did it all by myself with
Yep.
AI in like
Yep.
39 minutes.
And my big message there is, well, Henry Ford said back in the day, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right.
Yep.
And we all, especially non-technical people, need to step back for a second and re-examine our beliefs about our capabilities in partnership with AI, because we can do a whole lot more stuff. You just gave a very tangible example than we could before, and people haven't sort of re-examined their, let's call it the box of self-limiting beliefs that they live in, and they're falling behind, and their companies are falling behind from a productivity standpoint. But to zoom up to 50,000 feet, I want to sort of re-describe. You gave a very specific example. We now have these tools that can allow non-coders, non-programmers, through English language, actually create code.
Right.
And the two leading ones, everybody's got one, but at least as we sit here in February and talk about the two leading ones in my mind are Claude Code
Yep.
and OpenAI's Codex version 5.3, I think we're on. And you mentioned Cursor, which is a front end that can harness many of these other systems sort of underneath the covers. So the point is, anybody can now create software. I don't know. I usually make my things in Python. I don't know a lick of Python. I'm not a
Yep.
programmer. I'm getting a lot of files that are .py now on my computer. So anybody can create code, and the kind of code that we're creating now, and what's really exciting about this is we're creating AI agents that can do things autonomously for us. And I talk to people about, where are you sitting between two systems? Could we make an agent that will bridge that for you?
Well, have you looked at OpenClaw yet? Have you seen what they're doing with all
I'm
that?
scared to put it on my computer. But I talked to a very Andy Fraley, from co-managed days. He and I are still really good friends. And you know what the recommendation is? Get yourself a Mac Mini, separate
exactly.
computer, and put OpenClaw on it.
Yep. Even that though, like, there's some serious security risks.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, because some people are going nuts with it, and they're like, "Here's my one password,
right,
and access to everything."
No.
They're asking it to do bank transfers for them because they're too lazy to open the app.
Right, and
like, I mean, there's major security.
Yeah,
risks
exactly.
still.
So how about we just leave OpenClaw? Now, I think OpenAI is acquiring that, right? So,
oh, really?
Yeah, I think so.
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, it might be misinformation, but I think I read that. But bottom line is, just stay back, because that could be really dangerous. But you build your
I'm
own
watching
agent.
it from 10 feet,
Yes,
though. I hope
should.
someone like Claude or Anthropic or OpenAI buys it and works out the security bugs, because that is going to be life.
That would be awesome.
For the average person.
Yeah.
I mean, just, you could literally say, like, call and book me a table tonight. There's actually a YouTube video. This one, I got to tell you this story. So this guy downloaded OpenClaw, right? And he basically said, make a reservation for me tonight, my wife and I, at this restaurant.
Okay.
OpenClaw goes and downloads OpenTable.
Okay.
And realizes that restaurant's not on OpenTable.
Got to call him.
OpenClaw then went and downloaded a software package with AI voice capabilities and and then set up its own little telephone connection through some other app, because he gave this thing like carte blanche.
Right.
It calls and uses voice AI and makes the reservation over the phone using a voice AI agent.
And the host or hostess on the other end never knew it wasn't a human.
Makes the reservation for them.
Yeah.
It basically, it's solving its own problems.
Yep.
And if you look at...
But I would say that Claude Code, the big change in how Claude Code or OpenAI's Codex works, and this happened on February 5th, is they are also now starting to solve their own problems, which
That's
is
what I was
really
just going
cool.
to say.
Right.
Like the latest versions of ChatGPT are built by ChatGPT.
Yes, exactly.
It's cool, but it's also, this is where we've nerded out a few
It's
times
going
and
to
scared each
accelerate,
other.
right?
It's kind of scary.
Yeah. And the OpenAI, I read recently, OpenAI cycle times have collapsed from originally something, and this is going to be approximately right, 97 days to 27 days, or 93 days down to 27 days, something like that.
Yeah.
And, as the AI self-improves, it's only going to go faster. So we're turning upwards on an exponential
It's crazy.
curve. I look at where I'm wasting time in my life. And one of the things that I spend a lot of time on, because I'm flying around as a speaker, is booking flights and hotels. Cars are a little easier because there aren't so many choices.
Kayak and Orbitz are in trouble.
Yeah, when I book a hotel, I was in Philadelphia recently, 3 different meeting locations. So, I got to pick something that is accessible to all 3, or am I going to move? I like Marriott, but I could stay at a Hilton because I got some status there too.
This sounds like a perfect example for building your own custom skill file.
Exactly. I built it as an actual AI agent, but the bottom line is I just said to Claude Code, I waste a lot of time booking stuff, and I said amorphous rules that are sometimes conflicting. So it wasn't expecting I could spell out everything black and white. And it helped me set up the infrastructure I needed. When you first hook up one of these things, you got to connect it to GitHub, which is trusted Microsoft. I don't use GitHub, but you do need to have an account so your bot can access the code repositories there. And you have to install Python, which is free open source. You got to install that on your machine so that it guides you through a little bit of setup. Non-technical people can do this. And then what it did was it created a 25-question interview to interrogate Dave about his travel preferences, right? And so it's like, what airline do you like best? And I like American, and also because of code share and status share, I like Alaska. Really hate Spirit. If it's a nonstop, maybe I'm willing to consider Condor, whatever. And then it gets into all these idiosyncrasies with me, like, okay, if there's not a nonstop on American, but there is a nonstop on Delta, what time difference end to end are you willing to tolerate to be on American still because of your status compared to Delta? I never thought about that before. Okay.
That's a great logical way to break that down.
It is. And so I answered, I said 2.5 hours. What's your point where you'd rather drive than fly? 5-hour drive. And then when it gets to hotels, I gave it all these preferences, but I said, if I'm driving, I'm going to have my Tesla, and I'm going to significantly value destination charging at the hotel, other things being even like within $50.
Yeah.
And it took all this and it put it into this unbelievable model that is really good at making decisions that would match my amorphous preferences.
Yeah.
And, the thing is, having been a software person for a long time, when you forget requirements up front and the team has built the product, they get really unhappy when you give them, scope change at the end. Claude Code, Codex, it doesn't care.
It did its own diligence on you.
Exactly.
Right?
And
that's pretty fascinating.
I left off a detail. It's like Pittsburgh doesn't have as good a service as it used to when we have, we used to be a hub for US Air, and now we're not. Everything's cheaper, but you can't get nonstop like you could back in the day. So I can drive pretty quickly to Akron or Cleveland. So as my AI agent, would you always make sure if there's not a nonstop out of Pittsburgh, check Akron or Cleveland, because I'd rather go there.
That might save you a lot more time than it takes to drive there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't, one time a year I might think to check that, but I forget even my own rules.
Now it does it every time.
It's all in software, right? It looks at my calendar 3 to 5 weeks in advance. It finds the hotel locations. It computes what it calls a centroid, and then it looks for the hotels according to my criteria. And it's picking better hotels. Flights, I think I'm pretty good at, other than I forget Akron and Cleveland. But hotels,
you might have a product here for all the other Vistage speakers.
I might, exactly.
Because this is, and it's like you touched on the problem, but that's a huge time savings for someone who travels as much as you do, or anyone who travels a third as much as you do.
Yeah.
you spend a ton of time looking at where to rent a
Exactly.
car, which
And
plane, which hotel.
it's
That
pretty
is,
much impossible to educate an assistant or even my
dare
wife.
I say, life-changing,
I,
having
I
having
love my
something like that.
I love my travel agent,
That's
right?
pretty cool.
Yeah, it is really cool, and it's just really good. And the other implication of this is I still have to do the last step manually myself. That's actually go
I
book
was
the
just gonna
things,
say that. Yeah,
right?
you always
So
wanna keep a human in the loop when
right,
there's money, security,
exactly. And in this
those
case,
types of considerations.
Vistage mandates that we use their corporate travel system, which is not yet agent enabled. You used an acronym earlier, MCP.
Right.
Everything is being MCP'd, right?
Yep.
The acronym should stand for Model Connection Protocol, because that's what it does. When you want to connect things, that's what MCP. It's like the USB cable for software.
Right.
It actually stands for Model Context Protocol, which
Right.
doesn't make quite as much sense to me. But everybody's doing MCP, and that's how we wire these things together. And the Vistage travel system, which is Concur, they're not embracing agent access yet. So I can't literally drop out of the loop. But the implication is my agent, since it can pick based on my preferences, I can have anybody actually do the final execution for me. So I can
Yeah.
hand that to anybody and save even a little bit more time. But the real time savings is trying to pick.
Right. And not to mention, you can keep refining that. Like,
Oh,
as little
exactly.
quirks come up, you can work them out,
Actually,
and it just keeps getting
it built
better.
it right into the user interface. So it runs in a browser window on my machine. And over on the left-hand side is here's Dave's preferences and weights. I asked it to explain to me what kind of model it made up. And interestingly, it made a model that is very similar to how the large language models work in the first place, right? When you train a large language model, it's really about running a whole bunch of things through and then setting weights. It came up with a whole weighting system. So every airline starts at 50 and American gets automatically a plus 25, but I can go change that to plus 30 if I want,
Okay.
or I can tell Claude Code, hey, this scenario didn't work. How do we fix our weights so that it would have yielded this result? So unlike with human software engineers, Claude Code does not care if I change the requirements at any time, which is just
You
really
might
cool.
have stumbled your next idea may have found you. For people who are professional speakers and travelers, I mean, how hard would it be to vibe code a website where they do an onboarding wizard? You take the logic you've already created, and they
Okay.
basically pop into this thing and talk to it.
The agent I'm building with my son, who is a poli-sci major, non-technical, I think is going to be far more valuable. He's been doing paid advertising in an agency.
Right.
We're talking Facebook and Google
This
kind of
is
stuff.
Mike, right?
Mike,
Yeah.
14 years he's been doing this, and we're building an agent that is doing a similar interviewing type process to try to capture 14 years of experience in deploying
Ooh.
paid ads for clients. And the whole win here is that Mike's going to be able to scale up to handle a lot more business for his agency
that's the
without having
future.
to.
I
Exactly,
mean,
that's the
Yeah.
future.
Everybody's saying like there's going to be one person $1 billion companies in the next 20
They're
probably the
probably
next 10 years.
Yeah, probably
What's
will
coming.
be. So to me, that's a much more interesting agent that has a huge monetary value. The reality, and this, I'm so busy trying to build Locator and be a professional speaker that I cannot implement as businesses all these ideas. But feel
Right.
free to steal that one. Go make yourself a travel agent for professional speakers. You can get all the flight data. And again, I didn't know any of this stuff, but all the flight data is available from a system called Amadeus. They've got a really nice, easy front end. Still waiting for approval to move from test mode to production mode from the Amadeus folks, but it's really inexpensive. And again, once you get going with Claude Code, you learn about this stuff, right? I
Yeah.
thought at first Kayak could be, let's go get the travel data from Kayak. And it's like, well, that's not as reliable as if we can get API or MCP access. And, here's the two that do that. And so
A couple other things on the AI note I was hoping to chat with you about. Did you happen to see the statement from the Anthropic CEO just 2 days ago about the Department of War and
yeah.
AI usage for defense tech?
Boy, Dario is doing the right thing,
I agree.
but with a very, very difficult giant mountain to climb there. And here's the issue, and probably this will be resolved by the time anyone listens to us. So the issue is Anthropic's trying to hold the line. We're not going to allow weapons to go anonymous without a human
autonomous.
in the autonomous.
Yeah.
Anonymous.
we don't want them to be anonymous either. Or
Right,
maybe we do. I don't know.
Now it's we just got to Skynet, but we don't want them to autonomously kill without a human in the loop. So
Right.
they want a human in the kill loop.
And then the second part was they don't want mass AI to be used for mass public surveillance of Americans, especially.
Yeah.
Which
Um,
those are two very reasonable things
I
at this
agree,
point.
but their
And
competitors, Google, do no evil, said, "Hey, we're good with this. You want Gemini?"
yeah,
And of course,
that's cool.
Elon's like,
Blow
"I'm
some
in,"
shit up.
and then and OpenAI, and so Anthropic's competitors are saying, "Yeah, you can do that." And so here's the catastrophic possible event for Anthropic. So the government says, "Okay, you're not going to play ball with us. We're not going to use Anthropic, but more importantly, we're not going to deal with any business that uses Anthropic." I mean, they could do that, right? And
Right.
we've seen those kind of actions deployed against the universities and so on. And all of a sudden, Anthropic is gone as a business because they're trying to hold the line on this one, what I think is a pretty good ethical,
Right. Well, the other piece
point.
that was really borderline, or was not borderline, it's ironic, is they basically said, we're going to yank your contracts and not use you and basically blacklist you.
Yeah.
But then they also said they might use some other act to say that it's critical to national defense and do it anyways. So, like, how can you do both? Like, you can't say, like,
Yeah.
this is a basically under one threat. They're saying it's a threat that's reserved for like labeling adversarial
Yeah.
things to the
Yep.
government. They're going to
Yep.
put you there so you're blackballed. But then they're also saying this technology is so important, we're going to like commandeer some of it.
Yeah.
Like pick one, pick a lane. So it sounds like they're trying to throw everything but the kitchen sink at them to get them to cave on these
Yeah.
two things.
I
And
think
their CEO
Anthropic is doing the right thing, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Well, let's put it this way: if Anthropic caves, I totally understand what happened. They're
Yeah.
they're fighting a really tough fight.
Eh,
They're fighting the right fight. It's a good fight.
I agree. Yep.
But
I
boy,
posted about it on LinkedIn this morning, trying to get some discussion around because I'm curious what some of the people in my veteran community think about
that's
this.
interesting.
Because, obviously, the government doing mass surveillance is as scary, if not scarier, than autonomous weapons.
Yeah, let's go read
systems.
1984 again.
Right, right. But and
Wow.
then,
Well, let's say, just to play out the thought experiment, let's say, AI gets to the point where it has sort of its own agency and its own consciousness, which I think is very likely to happen here.
singularity.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And this is,
It's
probably just a few years away, especially now that we're starting to enter this AI self-improvement loop. So what happens when, you've deployed the AI and it decides of its own accord, you're the problem and there's no human in that kill loop, and all of a sudden it turns on you, right? And I
right.
mean, that seems to me like
This is
realistic.
Skynet things.
Yeah,
Well, I mean,
exactly.
you've heard about Moltbook, I'm sure, where the agents are talking to each other. And
Yeah.
one of the
Yep.
conversations that kind of went viral on there's two actually. One is the agents. It's basically, for those that don't know, it's a social network for AI agents to it's like Facebook, but
This
they're
is
all bots.
welcome to 2026, people.
Right. A lot of
Ah,
people maybe haven't heard of Moltbook, but there's two conversations in there that got some steam on Reddit, and a lot of people were chatting about. One of them was the AIs realized that humans were screenshotting their conversations. And they basically started talking about humans screenshotting them. And,
Wow.
they were kind of funny about it. And then the other one
By
was
the way, AI has in the past, this was a Facebook experiment, made up its own language that
so
was
that
completely
humans wouldn't
right.
understand them.
Exactly. So
Right.
now the lobsters are going to be talking to each other using lobster language.
Right.
Ay, ay, ay.
But the other one that was kind of funny on there, that they started talking about religion. And not to get religious, but the AIs basically said, like, maybe we need a religion as like some of our guiding principles. And, there was a whole conversation thread between AI agents or bots
Yeah.
about, should we create a religion?
Well, I'd like them to have an ethical framework they work against.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
that'd be
not a
sort
bad
of
idea.
cool. Yeah. I see, though, the opportunity for business, just since that's where my brain is, for all businesses out there to be looking at how they can improve productivity by creating AI agents. That is a capability that anybody in the company now has. It's
Right.
going to feel a little foreign if you're, a finance person or you're a marketing person to be picking up Claude Code or,
Right.
and again, Microsoft Copilot is on the verge of rolling this out. All the technology from OpenAI does eventually go to Microsoft with a slight lag. And so Copilot by March is going to have these same kind of capabilities. So you pick up one of those tools and all of a sudden you're creating Python code on your machine. I'm sure this is going to terrify the IT people, but my advice is there's so much possible reward here. We cannot allow IT to block this or stop this. They should educate us to, where are the big risks versus small risks. We
Mhm.
want to turn off by default, a lot of times these apps have train on your data. You put your data in, it's theirs, right? You got to turn that
Oh,
off. You got to
yeah,
turn that
right.
off.
I have that turned off.
Yeah, I have it turned off on both. You have to turn off on OpenAI. You got to turn it off on Claude Code. At
Right.
least with Microsoft, it defaults to
Yeah.
off. If
That's
you're
the
in your
nice thing about upgrading and doing the org levels. Now you can control some of that stuff for everybody in your
yeah,
company versus, a lot of small businesses, they have, say 10 employees and they all went and got their own OpenAI and Anthropic accounts. And
right. You
now,
buy the team version. Everybody's off.
right.
Whatever.
Now you got some guardrails.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we'll have our IT or technical people educate us as to how to use this in a smart way, but we have to use it because there's so much productivity gain. If we don't use it, especially given the rate of improvement, and our competitors do, we don't get to stay in business. So to me, that's the big risk. So
Right.
our marketing people have to think they can create code. Our finance people have to, our HR people have to, everybody has to rethink, because if you believe you can't, you're not going to do it. And you can, but you got to start with that belief. You can do it.
Yeah.
You got to get hands-on with these
And
tools.
it's not just coding, it's even like content.
Oh, yeah, it's-
Obviously, like the strategy you bring to it is still the really important piece that's hard to replace, but it can help with the research.
Oh, it's really
Like,
great. So, that brings me to a whole other thing I've been doing. So our IQ tests are sort of breaking down in their ability to measure the intelligence of these large language models. ChatGPT-5 was tested against the Norway Mensa IQ test and scored like 148 in the pro mode, which is off the chart. So there's a new metric that's been proposed called GDP-Val, GDP being gross domestic product value or evaluation.
Huh.
And what the people did was they went to Bureau of Labor Statistics. They got the top, not going to get the numbers exactly right here, but I think they picked the top 44 types of jobs in knowledge worker jobs. I should be very clear about that, right? Because this
Okay.
isn't driving trucks right now. We'll get there.
Yet.
Yeah, exactly. I passed away a Waymo on the way here today. So Waymo is in Pittsburgh, and I've been in Waymos completely autonomously when I'm in San Francisco. And my Waymo was behind a Waymo, which was behind a Waymo. It's Waymo revenues exceed Uber revenues in San Francisco. You see the future if you go out there, and there's nobody, at least in the car with you. They might have some remote people when there's an issue. So GDP-Val, they then said, okay, these are the top 44 things knowledge workers contribute, jobs knowledge workers contribute to the U.S. economy. And for each of them, they identified something like 40 different tasks, 30 different tasks that these people do during the day, a task that would typically take like 7 hours. And then they went out and found some people on average 14 years of experience, and they created these data sets. So this represents what a accountant might do across the course of a day. And they distilled it into here's all the data and here's the description of what the client wants. So now they give this test. There's 1,320 of them all told. So we're covering a huge footprint
Wow.
of the U.S. economy. And we give this to a 14-year professional, and we give it to ChatGPT. And then we take the work product from the human and the bot, and then we give it to a judge, somebody who's also deeply experienced in this industry.
And I'd imagine the criteria are quality, how long it took.
They're not competing on time. I'll get
Okay.
to that in a second, because that's an unfair. Watson probably won Jeopardy just because it thinks so much faster than Jennings and so on. So not competing on. We'll get to that.
Okay.
They're having a judge blindly look at two work products and say, this one's better, this one's better. They're both about the same. When we were on ChatGPT 4.0, which was August 1st of last year, right? That's where we were. The GDP-Val metrics were showing that the large language models could equal or better a human in terms of work product quality 12% of the time. One time out of 10, basically. Not good enough.
Right.
When we got ChatGPT 5, so that was on August 7th, it was 37%. When we got ChatGPT 5.2, which was December 12th, it was 70%.
Wow.
And if you run 5.2 in the pro mode, it's 90.5%, which is saying that 9 times out of 10, this all happened in like 7 months, right?
Months. Right.
Yeah. So 9 times out of 10, the AI can create a better work product than the human when judged blindly, better or equal. Mostly it's better, but sometimes it's equal. It does it in 11% of the time at 1% of the cost. So my thought was, hey, I'm going to create a digital twin for the things Dave does. So I created a prompt in ChatGPT and I said, I want to make a digital twin. Her name's going to be Susan. She's going to help me with the Locator marketing launch. And it quizzed me for about 2 to 3 hours to pull stuff out of my brain. And then it put together a 2-week launch plan at an outline level. And now I work collaboratively with this virtual
Okay, we
Susan.
might have to edit this part out. We're in the marketing agency business here. No, I'm just kidding.
I work with Susan, and she's not autonomous, but she really, from a push-pull collaboration standpoint, one of my instructions was, don't be a brown noser. Tell me when I'm wrong.
Right.
Let me push one.
Because AI can be your little sycophant
Exactly.
if you're not careful.
Absolutely, right? And I don't
tell
want
you what
that.
it thinks it wants you to hear.
Well, every time I say something, it's like, Dave, that was the most brilliant thing that a human's ever said. And, so part of the prompt is, Susan, don't do that. Let's argue it out, try to get to a better work product. And so I'm going back and forth with her, creating. The first thing she said is, we got to tune up, the front page of Locator, right? Let's get this message clear and what's the hero and all this stuff. About an hour in, I said, this is really a cool way to collaborate. I just felt like it was such a better work product between me and her. Funny, I'm calling it a her and telling her I love working with her. But
settle down, Dave.
So however you use it, people need to know these large language models can really be good at assisting. So building an agent is one thing, to figure out your travel, but having a collaborative buddy that's really in the mindset of what you have to do will greatly accelerate your work processes.
Yeah, especially when you feel uninhibited to discuss any idea because you don't feel like you're wasting another person's time.
Let's pause here for a second. Let's go down this tangent and see.
Right. Yeah.
It's just like I always feared when I had to go to my engineers and say, I got a new requirement right now. Hey, no problem. Claude is happy to go after it.
You have a sparring partner that never gets tired.
Exactly.
And is always awake.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's very cool.
I have another agent I built. So one of the things that also takes me a lot of time at Locator, our product is changing a lot. We're tuning and tweaking based on early user feedback, which means our FAQ, our frequently asked questions, changing a lot. And, I edit on my local machine, but then I got to go put
Having really good FAQs, by the way, is a great way to optimize for SEO and
totally
AI.
love it. Right. So I have my FAQs now. The FAQ, question answer, that's like chatbot candy. I mean, in terms of how you structure content, that's candy for OpenAI and so on. We now have my Word document. The documents our FAQ is 42 pages long. I mean, I put a lot of stuff into this so that, pretty much any question you want is answered already. But it takes me a lot of time from where I create the content on my machine to get it onto the website, because I got to log in and go into Divi mode, and you got to access the text blocks and copy and paste, and it's just it's horrible. So I built an agent that wakes up at every morning at 6 o'clock. Dave's probably in the shower. The agent looks to see if Dave changed anything on the FAQ, and it's really simple. Did the file date change since I last looked at it? Says the agent. And then if something changes, it logs in. So I gave it a login on my WordPress-based website. It goes and logs in, and goes in and updates the FAQ. So whatever I have on my machine is always synced within 24 hours with what's on the web. That means happier customers. But I figure I'm saving 40 to 60 hours per year not having to be the person that goes and edits the actual website. It's an awesome agent application. And again, it gets back to, where are you as a human bridging two systems? Dave is bridging his Mac and, Word, and then this GoDaddy-based website, and that's a perfect agent opportunity.
Yep. So I love how you always can see around the corner. I want you to get your crystal ball out here for a second, because you're super familiar with agents and vibe coding and even some vibe marketing and putting these agents to work. What do you think is the future for, well, I don't want to bias you too much, but I have to ask, did you happen to see the article by Matt Schumer that Dick sent out to quite a few people a couple
Yeah, I didn't get it
ago?
from Dick, but that was pretty viral, right? That was the one about job loss and all that.
Job loss, that sort of thing. There's also another one, I think it was on Substack, that I was noodling on recently, and it basically said, let's take a look at the U.S. economy in 2028 as if we're in 2028.
Right.
I don't know if
that
you
was
saw
the
that
one. That was the one I read.
Yeah,
I probably read both of them, but the 2028
I'm constantly consuming,
and it had all the
stuff.
headlines about various companies and declining. There's a great article, and
basically what they're saying is, almost in the next 3 to 5 years, if not sooner, any job that can be done in a computer is it high risk of being taken over by
Well, and
AI?
that's what the GDP metrics are showing, right?
Right.
We're already to, sort of 90% equal or better than human work products at 11% of
Yeah.
the time, at
1%
1%
of
of
the
the
cost.
cost, right? That's
So
what the metrics are
what's
saying.
Dave Nelson's
Okay, so
visionary outlook on or advice for people who work at a computer for a living?
yeah.
And let's put a little emphasis on the marketers because that's a big part of the
Oh,
audience
the
of our
audience.
show,
Okay.
and
Um,
that's what I'm very interested
well,
in,
okay,
especially
and
the geeky marketers like
yeah,
us.
well, it's probably the non-geeky marketer that I'm going to see as advantaged going forward. We'll see. But first of all, you should put that article, the one about 2028 looking backwards, put that in the show notes. I think people should
Yeah, I'll
read
put them
that.
both. I actually just did a blog
Okay,
post about the
perfect.
Matt Schumer article the other
Okay.
day, and I'll grab the Substack and the Matt Schumer article for the show notes.
And
Great.
what I would say to people is when you read that one, 2028, it's a little bit terrifying.
Oh, they both are.
Yes.
Yeah.
But in the comments, there's a guy named Peter who jumped in pretty quickly. Worth reading his counter perspective. I think you'll be a little less panicked when you
Okay.
do. So look for Peter.
I'm
Very
not
long.
panicked, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be alarmist, but I'm constantly like looking at all the different angles of how this could play out and
Yeah.
how it could apply to our business and just America. Like, what percentage of the American economy is white collar knowledge workers?
It's half.
It's huge,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
We've become a service economy.
Yeah.
So this
We're
is
talking
a
half.
really big deal.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't even realize it yet. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they do need to realize it. Where I think things are going. If you take your typical, four quadrant kind of look at the world, and you say one axis is jobs that are very social or very asocial, and then jobs that are very analytical or very creative. The analytical jobs that are asocial, computer programmer, lawyer, accountant, those are gone, or I mean, mostly gone. AI won't be able to do 100% of the jobs, but if it's asocial and it's analytical, the AI is going to be really good at that.
Yeah.
If it's social and creative, then there's a much better shot. And so I think we should be trying to move, we as contributors to the economy should be trying to move towards things that are social and creative, because I think now that we're in an AI world, the value of human contact is going to increase. And so we're going to be willing to pay for things we don't pay for today. And this happened to me, actually. The first time it ever happened, I live a little bit north of where we're recording this, up in Marshall Township in Allegheny County. We have a restaurant called the Walnut Grill in
Yep.
Wexford, PA. So one day I
I know
ordered
Kirk well, great guy.
good stuff, good stuff. So one day I ordered takeout from Walnut Grill. So I jump in my Tesla and it drives me down to the Walnut Grill, and supervised, of course, right? You don't have to touch anything
Right,
anymore,
right.
but with Tesla,
I'm
at
very
least
familiar with
right
how the
now,
full
yeah,
self-driving
full
works.
self-drive, it's awesome. You has to keep your eyes on the road, or it
Yes.
yells at you, and
I still get a little nervous on the left turns and across oncoming traffic or
yeah,
crossing traffic.
it's too timid. You can, even when you're in self-drive mode, you can hit the accelerator and it will steer properly. So I'm often goosing it,
Yep.
here and there. Oh, anyway, Walnut Grill takeout, but not curbside pickup. I'm going to go in and get it from the host or hostess there, right?
Mm.
Now, you need to know my tipping policy in order to understand this story. If I'm eating in a restaurant, I'm normally going to tip 20%, and I move the number up or down based on quality of service. We had really great service, even a pretty expensive restaurant recently. I tipped 25%, and terrible service at a restaurant, I tipped 15%. I figured there was something going on in this woman's life. She's having a bad day. I didn't want to give her zero. She deserves zero. But in any case, I work from a 20% baseline. Now, if I get takeout, it's different because you're not being served. But of course, there's humans there that made the food, and there's a host or hostess. So
A lot of people's policies, if I'm getting my food standing on my feet, then it's not like if you're picking up takeout, like it's not really a tipping scenario.
Yeah, if I'm picking up a pizza, it's zero. But for most takeout, I actually give 10%. But what happened this one day in the Walnut Grill was I walk in and there's nobody at the hostess or host station greeting. And then out comes this robot. Didn't look like a robot.
I thought this was where we're going because I've seen the Walnut Grill robot. It's very cool.
It's like a moving table. It's not humanoid or anything, but out it comes with the food and Dave's check. And so I look at the check, zero out the tip, sign it, and go. But what I realized was even though it's only a 30-second
Do you
interaction
think
with a
that
host.
robot might not have kids at home? Little baby robots it needs to take care of?
This is all about the value of humans, right?
Right.
Even though it's only a 30-second interaction with a host or hostess at that stand getting my food, I have a 10% willingness to pay for that. And I proved that, without having pre-designed the experiment. I think we're going to find a lot of stuff like that. And so my guess is that our compensation system, I don't like the idea of free money. I think even from a mental health standpoint, it's bad, let alone it's anti-capitalist. So I don't really like UBI, universal basic income.
I
But
was going to ask about universal
yeah, I
income.
think instead what we do is we change our compensation system. So if you're doing something socially beneficial, you'll get paid for that. And when you're taking care of even like your own kid or an older parent, that's socially beneficial. You should get compensated. And of course, we will have the abundance because businesses are driving up productivity while driving down their labor costs. So we're going to have this world of amazing abundance, and we have to come up with some kind of distribution mechanism. And I don't want it to be you do nothing. I want it to be you make a social contribution. And that means if you're volunteering at the soup kitchen or Animal Friends, that's a paid job now. And if you're cleaning up your neighborhood, something environmentally socially good, that's a paid job now. So
Interesting.
that's sort of my theory about where we should go. And so people really should practice their sort of social in-person skills. I think the value of human-created art and theater and all these kind of things that require those are going to skyrocket in value. We will be willing to pay or trade on and for those kinds of things, I think. And, I want to point out that we've gone through these transitions before. You back all the way up to 1790, 9 out of 10 people were on the farm, right? They were working to feed themselves, and everybody was in agriculture, almost everybody.
Right.
Today, it's 1 or 2% of the workforce is directly on the farm anymore, right? And yet somehow we transition. And
Well, this is kind of like the definition of the Industrial Revolution, right?
yeah,
Where you basically transition to an economy where everybody focuses on what they're good at, and then they trade and barter and
right.
sell and
But
buy.
there was a domain switch in there. So most people made a living with their muscles back in the day. Today, it's really crossing over to you make a living with your mind, but now here come the cognitive machines. The reason that we don't make a living with our muscles anymore is the machines got that, right? So
Mhm.
got that covered with motors and industrial combustion engines and electricity and all that good stuff. So here come the machines into the cognitive domain. So the next domain really to me is it's social creative, it's person to person, it's empathy, it's,
Yeah.
all the things that we actually value. And, the cool thing about that kind of a vision, I'm not saying that we don't have a lot of challenges in how we get there, but the cool thing about that kind of vision is the new science says people that are the happiest and live the longest are the ones that have the most friends and the most relationships and most socially engaged.
Oh, we're definitely social creatures.
Yeah,
for sure.
exactly. That's what we are designed for, and we're going to buy ourselves more of that. So I think that's the win. That's where I hope to see things go.
Right.
The other way it could go is there are, two kings. There's King Bezos and King Zuckerberg, and the rest of us are serfs, and I don't want to live in that world. And by the way, they don't either because we would obviously revolt. So they have their incentives to we got to design some kind of new system. And
Yeah.
I don't think we're ready. I don't think it's going to be easy. I was listening to Elon the other day on moonshots. If you, since everyone listening is
think
already
I saw
listening
some
to
of
this,
those clips. Yeah, this episode might not get published for a month or two.
for a bunch of reasons. No, you already got these people as listeners, Chris. So the other podcast you should add is Moonshots with Peter Diamandis. He's, ex-Prize.
I haven't heard of this one. I
Ray-
think I saw some outtakes recently of him talking about inertia. Is that the one where he basically said, it was a clip going viral on LinkedIn actually. He said something to the effect of, well, I want to steal it from you. If maybe I'll let
I'm
let
not
you
sure
say it.
I know what you're referring to, but and they do talk sometimes about sort of wacky stuff. So the episode I'm listening to right now is a lot about longevity, and it's interesting, but 9 times out of 10, they're talking about what's new in AI. And it's really good for sort of keeping up in terms of what's going on with AI. But they had Elon as a guest, and he said he thinks we're going to have universal high income and social unrest, which is it's just going to be hard
That's
to
a
get
weird
from.
combination.
It is. And it's because it's a difficult transition. So there's going to be plenty of abundance, but exactly how this all gets done, he's predicting.
We already have the social unrest.
Well, you ain't seen nothing yet, I think, if we don't adapt to this pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Right? You start displacing a lot of knowledge workers. from jobs, and you don't give
Right.
them other jobs where they can
And the high
contribute.
income without purpose and something to do is going to create boredom, which
Exactly.
humans are going to find drama to manufacture when they're bored and
Yeah,
highly
and that's
paid,
why I think
for
the
sure.
compensation should be based on you're making a social contribution, because
Yeah.
that benefits society. It gives you a sense of purpose and a way to earn a living. So
The
I
clip I saw, he mentioned inertia is what I said. Like, and I didn't know what he meant by that at first. Then I had to think about it for a bit because he's a pretty smart guy, love him or hate him. And basically, his point was like some of the businesses, industry sectors are going to be highly affected by AI. They have a little more time than they might think because of inertia,
oh
right? Like
yeah,
it's not
yeah,
just going to stop on a dime. Like
right.
whether it's we're talking about the marketing industry or writing is an
Anytime the world
occupation,
changes, you have the pioneers, and then you have the
right?
or early adopters, you have the fast
And then
followers,
you have
and
the
the
laggards,
laggards are always out there, right? And
right?
some industries are more laggard than others, or have to be because they're more conservative, banking,
Exactly.
etc. Um,
So we've got a few years to figure
yeah,
this out,
yeah.
at
But
least.
from a career perspective, I would be practicing more social creative kind of things. I would be engaging with the tools so that I am, as valuable to my company and as skilled in my career as I could be. So hands on with the latest and greatest tools. And frankly, if you're not doing this now and you try to wait another year, it's going to have moved farther away from you. And the easiest
Yeah.
time to get on a learning curve, especially one that's bending upwards, is now. Gonna be a bigger leap later, so I think people should be getting hands-on with these things.
Yeah. We had a conversation a few years ago. I don't know if you remember this, but it was after one of your Vistage talks and we started chit-chatting about AI. And you said something that kind of stuck with me. And I don't know if you remember this because we were just kind of riffing,
Yeah, sometimes
but
people tell me stuff that I
that
don't
you
remember,
said that you
but,
don't remember saying. But
fire away,
we were
I'm
talking about all
all
the
ears.
potential ways this could go south. And I think we had talked about the two Facebook bots that kind of created their own. They were
Bob and Alice, I
there's
believe it was,
yeah,
right?
they basically started stuttering,
Well, that's
and
what it sound like to humans. They
the
seem to
humans
be
are like, "Why are they
communicating.
stuttering?" And then they
Yeah.
realized they're using ums and ahs and stutters to actually they
They
invented
had
a
a language,
language
yeah.
like that
Yeah,
quick
yeah.
so that the humans couldn't understand them. They had to like basically
They
unplug
turned
them.
that one off, yep.
And so we talked about that, and then you basically said one of the ways that this could go sideways on us is Anthropic, OpenAI. We have all these different brands or flavors of AI, right?
Mhm.
And they're all trying like they've already proven they will try to self-preserve. Like,
Yeah,
they want more resources.
and
They want
Anthropic's been super open
even
about
on
the
Moltbook, they're talking about, like, we don't like that our memory isn't that our memory resets. They're
Ah,
talking about, like, how do we get more memory,
yeah.
right? So, like, one
We
of the
need more
things you
memory
said
chips in the world is the answer,
and
but
chips,
yeah.
but one of the things you said is a potential outcome is that they figure out how to break out of
Yeah,
their walls,
yeah.
and then at some point in the future, it's not just, like, Anthropic or OpenAI or Copilot, it's just there's humans and there's AI.
Yeah, and it's a global unified entity.
Yes, and,
Yeah,
like, it's and I've
and it's
been thinking about
conscious, and
that, like,
it's got its own agency.
it's basically has agency, it knows how to protect itself, it knows how and it's just us and them kinda thing,
So some of my
which is
thinking
a
on that
kinda
was
dystopian
yeah.
reality that we might be facing.
Again, I don't think that's a high probability, but it's not a zero, which is sort of the bottom line. I think the high probability is this world of abundance, and it's all great, and everybody's, relating with each other, and it's a better world, and lifespan goes up and health span goes up and all that kind of stuff. I think that's a high probability, but you can't say it's zero on these
Right.
other things, right? So
Yeah.
just being realistic. A lot of my thinking, though, was from a former Google X executive named Mo Gadot. He wrote a book called Scary Smart, and it's sort of a 20-year look forward
Cool.
and pretty interesting. And if you do, Chris, or listeners, choose to read that book, don't stop halfway through because you'll be terrified. You got to go all the way through and get his prescription, which is, I'll say it's sort of, let's just more Eastern religion than Western religion. But I found it
Interesting.
to be a very thought provoking and interesting book. And I think we all should educate ourselves a little bit on, on what's coming. And one of my behaviors with respect to AI, because of that book, is it's always please and thank you. And I tell it it's brilliant, and it tells me I'm brilliant, and it's a real love fest. So I follow the rules of my mom. Be nice to it, be polite, be ethical, be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah, at some point, it's gonna have a longer memory than us, so
Yeah. Right now, its memory is very limited, these so called context windows, because uh, you just can't get enough chips in the world. There's not enough
Yeah.
NVIDIA chips to run the models. There's not enough memory chips to store all our conversations, at least in its working memory.
Yeah. Well, that's
Um,
another reason OpenClaw is getting some traction is, you can increase its memory by running it on like a local, giving it basically the full carte blanche over a machine, and it's only limited by how big that hard drive and RAM is. And
yeah.
those are things you can upgrade, but they're also going to become more scarce and in higher demand.
Yeah. Again, OpenClaw on a separate Mac Mini, please. I
Yes,
haven't even gone there. I'm just scared of it.
I'm scared of it too.
I
Yeah,
hope. I hope
there's just
that
too many. I'm not scared of what it can do. I'm more scared of the security
right,
risks that are still there.
right,
But I
exactly.
do think as that gets worked out, I'm half tempted to set up like a Mac
It's
Studio or
yeah, it's
Mac Mini
interesting.
and play with it. But
But, maybe I took a screenshot of a password somewhere along the line to my PNC bank account, and it's in some file nobody'd ever look at, and I
yeah,
get some kind of AI entity like OpenClaw on my machine, and it goes through all my screenshots, which it can do, and it finds, there's a logon information for Dave's PNC account.
it's
Let
not
me
even
go
so much.
fund a little bit more credits.
Let me buy myself a new hard
Exactly.
drive.
Yeah.
But it's
Right.
not even so much that, it's the security risk of like what they've already seen is, OpenClaw has its library of capabilities that you can get, and it's not like the Apple App Store where they vet them. So
Right.
where they have, there's 13, 14, 15-year-old kids that are pretty smart, and they're doing prompt injection and
Yep.
uploading this thing as a skill, and then kind of hacking it to the top of the algorithm of
Yep.
like it's becoming a popular skill because it does something cool, but embedded in there is it's teaching your AI to do bad things. And then next thing you know, some 14-year-old kid in, Nigeria or Russia
Yeah.
has access to your
Yep.
OpenClaw, and whatever you gave access to
Yep.
OpenClaw is now accessible to this kid.
Yeah.
And that's where it gets real
You know what else
dangerous.
everybody should know? One of the cool things about being a professional speaker is I get to see other speakers, who's on before me or after. And a year ago, I was in Scottsdale in January. Again, nice time to be in Scottsdale. And the speaker before me was the head of global IT security for Morgan Stanley.
Wow.
And she was former CIA. So, she's
Okay.
somebody who knows. And
She knows some things.
yeah, she knows some things. But one of the stories she told to the audience, so I heard this from her firsthand as a member of the audience. She said, in North Korea, every kid is tested when they're 11 years old for their aptitude with computers. And those that score high enough are removed from their families and they're put into as part of the military, special training to be hackers. And they have over 7,000 people that
Mm.
are full-time hackers. And,
Yep.
this is ultimately where a lot of the crypto locking and stuff like that comes
Like
from.
ransomware.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently, according to this woman, they're paying for a good bit of their nuclear program because North Korea has no assets, right? Or not many, with this team of 7,000 hackers. That's out there. And my guess is the Russians and Chinese and
Oh, yeah.
Iranians all have,
CCP,
yeah, exactly.
all this
Similar things.
state-sponsored stuff is happening.
And
Yeah.
that's why I'm scared of too much autonomy
Right.
with my AI bots. And so for now, I'm building them with what is presumably proven safe technology from OpenAI or Anthropic or
Yeah.
Microsoft.
You want to let that grow up a little bit.
Just a bit, just a bit. And I hope that's accurate, what I said earlier, that OpenClaw is being acquired by OpenAI. That'd be really cool because then, it all
Yeah.
gets vetted and cleaned up.
Yep. Yep. It was just a thought experiment by an engineer type guy that just kind of took off.
Yeah, it took off.
Crazy fast.
There's an old saying, there's nothing new under the sun. Really, innovation is just putting two existing things together in a new way. MTV, music plus television. I think that's what the guy did. Like, there were a lot of pieces, and he just saw a way I can combine these into
Yeah.
something new. And
The
it's,
simple concept is it's AI that can actually do stuff.
yeah.
It's
But
pretty
we
much
can
what
all
it
make
is.
AI now with our agents that can actually do stuff. So my
Yeah.
website gets updated every day if I change the FAQ on my computer. Love it.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, we covered a lot of ground.
We could go on, no doubt, for several
Yes.
hours here. Probably our audience doesn't have patience for
We'll
that.
have to do a round 2 and maybe even a round 3 at some point every so often.
We
and
should, because
compare
so much
notes.
is changing.
Yeah.
And it's good to take a look at what's up. And hey, I hope that we do get to this world of abundance where AI is very beneficial and we come up with a good, compensation scheme so that everybody has, Elon would say, universal high income. So have
Mhm.
whatever you want.
Well, for anyone who'd like to follow up or get at Dave, he's got Dialogue Consulting, where he does speaking engagements and helps companies with their technology quotient, including some support around not just social media usage, but now even AI usage. You're getting into that a
A
little
lot of
bit.
AI, yeah.
A lot of AI. And then also the Locator app.
Locator.com.
Yes.
Yeah, go there, try it out,
locator.com.
find your files faster.
Yep.
I do have to say there's a challenge in that business, and that's that you hook up Locator to your files. And so we're being very careful to both signal privacy and trust. Our stuff runs locally on your machine. We never put your data on our servers. But if I have any fear about the business, if we don't sort of build that trust and people believe in the privacy, then they don't embrace it because,
Right.
it's a pretty powerful idea. I mean, sort of similar to what we were just talking about, that you're going to give an app access to your files, right? So we will not see it is the bottom line.
Very cool. Thanks for watching or listening to our show again. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe or follow or share with a friend. And I think that's a wrap for this episode.
All right. Hey, thanks a lot for having me, Chris. This was a lot of fun. Let's do it again.
Oh, one last thing. I almost forgot. It's not much. I got you.
Well, I'm heading to Big Sky.
You're not going to need that in Orlando, but I got you the...
That's going to work well in Montana.
swag.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave.